Hi guys, it's Sin. I wanted to do a video just to talk about a few things, and hopefully it'll help. First, I have my disclaimer I'd like to read. This information is for reference purposes only. This information provided is not to diagnose, treat, or cure or prevent any disease, illness, or any injured condition of the body. This information is not intended to be a substitute for medical counseling. Anyone suffering from illness, injury, or disease should consult with a professional, qualified healthcare provider. I am not a medical professional. I am a certified holistic health and wellness coach, giving my guidance and sharing my own experiences as to what has worked for me. Everyone is different, and what has worked for me may not work for you. That's why I am here, to help guide you into what will work for you or not. I am not for everyone. I don't judge. I won't force my opinion, beliefs, or perspectives. I will only volunteer information for the purpose of helping others. I would appreciate the same respect from you. I appreciate good vibes, positivity, acceptance, kindness, love, compassion. This is a safe place. Any mean, rude, or disrespectful comments will be addressed appropriately. This content is for informational purposes only. So, I was writing in my journal, and the first episode that I did, and I posted, I was setting boundaries, and the people that are closest to me kind of know what's going on and what kind of brought that out. And it kind of gets my heart pounding a little bit every time I listen to that video. And I don't want it to be perceived as anything negative or passive aggressive or anything like that. I am simply just stating that I have boundaries. And in the last 3 years, I've had 8 women do me dirty. So that's kind of like what I was addressing. And what I want to kind of talk about today is how women treat women. And it's really enlightening that more and more women are coming on board and supporting more women instead of hating and resenting women for who they are or for what they do, or just because they're your stepkid's parent. That is one thing I'd like to address, because I've been a step parent twice, and it's an amazing gift to be able to be a step parent. You have an opportunity to make a change. There's a reason why that home for that child was separated, right? And somebody new is going to come in and be with their mommy or their daddy, and they, kids always want what's best for their parents and what makes them happy. And when there's a partner that comes in and they hate their stepkids merely because of the other parent, I can't fathom what that would feel like for somebody that can be like that, to have that much resentment and hate in the heart. I don't know what that would feel like, but it's happened to me. I've been on the other end of that. I've been hated because I was the stepmom. My stepson was 18 months old when I came into his life, and I was thrilled. I just wanted to be a mom, and I thought that was amazing. So his mom was in the picture. His mom took care of him and nurtured him, but I got to be his friend. I got to make an impact in his life because I didn't have to be his mother. I didn't have to be the disciplinary. And that was cool. We got to sit on the couch and snuggle and eat ice cream together. So being a step parent is very rewarding. It can be a very good thing. And if you're marrying somebody who has kids, please give them a chance. It's not their fault. What they're going through, being separated from their parents, and then having somebody new come in, it's very difficult for kids. And I've had two stepdads. This first stepdad wasn't so kind, so he was great, don't get me wrong. He provided for us, he gave us a home. My mom was a single mom of two kids at the time. But there were things that he did that weren't so nice, like squeezing your hand when he forced you to hold his hand. And he'd squeeze it or he'd pinch you. It's like, why? Why was he like that? He has an opportunity to take these two kids and be an inspired step-parent and supportive. But, you know, somebody being like that or doing those things is unhealed parts of them. So as adults, or as we grow up, we have to learn that it's not because of us, even though they make us feel like it is. It's not us. It's not who we are. It's who they are, or who they were. My mom eventually divorced him after 7 years. He would hit us with the belt. My mother told my brother, he was 18 months younger than me, to go brush his teeth, and I was in the bathtub. And I think I was like 7, maybe my brother was 6, 5. And Ernie saw that my brother was in the bathroom with me while I was in the bathtub, and he started hitting him and screaming at him and threw him into the bathtub with me, curtain rod and everything. I went frantic, I went crazy, screaming at him back, standing up. I was so young. My brother watched him and my mother smoke cigarettes. And he learned at a young age how to light a match. He was curious about fire. Fire was fascinating to him. But instead of teaching him about fire, my mom just told him that it's dangerous, you can't play with it. So one day he was curious, he got under the bed and started lighting matches. And he lit the mattress on fire. And Sharon and Ernie, my mother and Ernie, picked up the mattress, and they had a sliding glass door, and there was a pool outside. They threw it in the pool. And then my brother was hit with the belt. Instead of making sure he was okay, and I grabbed him and I took him, but they caught up with us. I did everything I could to protect my brother. But he had an opportunity to be a good step-parent, and he chose to step out on my mother and cheat on her. And then that was her straw. Once he did something to her, then that was over. But it didn't matter so much what he did to us. Being a step-parent is a special gift. And the next story is the best. Years later, after my mom divorced Ernie, we went to my grandparents. And they took us in. We all slept in a bedroom. We had one bed and a dresser in there, I believe. I'm not sure what the sleeping arrangements were. I'm sure my brother and my mom slept on the floor, me and my brother, I don't know. Doesn't matter, but my grandmother was amazing to me. She helped us, and she taught me how to cook, and she taught me how to clean, and once I kind of got good at it, and she gave me some chores to do, and she would pay me. And I felt like I was wanted and needed and loved and nurtured. And my grandma became like one of my best friends growing up. And so we lived through that for a bit. And then my mom, she met this man through my grandmother, and it was not a good idea. She moved us out of my grandparents' house, moved him in with him in his condo and his son. And that man was very abusive to his son. My mom did not let him touch us. But he did a couple times touch my brother. And that was a big mistake because he had me to deal with. He was very hands-on, physically abusive to his son. He would throw him down a whole set of stairs. We lived in a 2-story condo, and he'd throw his son down the stairs. It was terrifying, scary. And my mom came to us one day and said, "We're going to get married." And we cried. At that moment, my mother knew that it wasn't a good thing, and thank God she made the right choice, and she moved out and did not marry him. I think about that kid all the time, and I always prayed that he'd be okay. And I always thought that I felt bad that we left him behind, but we didn't have much choice. And then sometime after, my mom was single for a bit, and we lived with my aunt, and she met Don, who I now call my dad. He had an opportunity to be a stepdad. He met my mom and he met us a couple times, and then they went off to Vegas and got married. And it was the best thing. He owned a home in Mission Viejo in California, and we got to move in his house. And coming from where we came from, that was like, wow, that was fancy. That was exciting. Like, we all had our own rooms, and we had beautiful beds and nice rooms, and we could do what we wanted. We could put posters up, and I grew up in the 80s, so, of course I had my 80s stuff. But Don had an opportunity. He had 2 older children that were grown, and I would see my stepbrother quite often, but not my stepsister too much. She married shortly after my parents got married, and our parents, and she moved away and had a couple kids of her own. But we saw Mike often, and he would hang out with us and do things and drive us around, and we would always have fun. And Don, my stepdad, would take us to the mall and give us a credit card with a limit. And back then it was a lot. And I'd come home, and I would, he'd come pick me up at a certain time. He'd drop us off for a couple hours and then come back and get us. And I'd show my mom. I was so excited about what we got. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is so expensive. What do you mean you got Guess jeans? I can't believe you bought all this. You can't get this. We need to take it all back. You can't have this. It's too much, blah, blah, blah." And he defended me. And he saw that it was worth it because it made me happy. I never had anything like that before. Not only did he give us things and set us up very nicely, but he treated us amazing. He treated us like his own. And it was great, because now we had a male figure in our lives that was stable and had a job and wasn't hurting us and wasn't abusing us mentally, emotionally, physically, and we were happy. And he was amazing to my mom. He would get up, make coffee, bring it to her while she was getting dressed, getting ready for work. He did all of the laundry. He would warm her car up in the winter so it'd be warm for her inside. Give her coffee, walk her out to the car, stand there and wave to her, and we'd beep, beep, wave goodbye. Those are the best memories. In the summertime, he'd go out and he'd warm up her car and turn the AC on for her. On the weekends, he'd go get the cars washed and fill up the tanks. She never had to get gas. She never had to wash her car. She was treated so good. And she was good to him too, but she's a harper. She's a nagger. She's very negative. She's very criticizing. So he went to work Monday through Friday and had the weekends off just like her. And he wanted to sit at the table and just do his paperwork. back in the day, there was these like clearinghouse like contests. And he would sit for hours all day long, puff on a cigar, which he didn't inhale. He just liked to smoke it. He'd get some of it, I'm sure he'd inhale some. And he would have his little, what do you call, it's orange juice and vodka. And kind of drink that and sip on that during the day, and maybe some football on the TV, and he'd just sit there and he was happy and content. For some reason that pissed her off. Why? She couldn't stand his envelopes on the table, his paperwork on the table, his stamps. One of the cool things too is he would just like shut her down, just like ignore. You know, they would bicker back and forth, but he never really engaged. They never had arguments, like fights. He never let it get that far. And that was an amazing example for me, because I grew up in chaos. I grew up with my mom not being so nice to us, and her picking partners that weren't so nice to us and so nice to her either. Those are definitely lessons that we learn. But I think having him in our life really helped. You know, we got to go to good schools. We lived in nice homes. And finally, from the time I was, 12 years old, 13? I think I was in the 7th grade when we moved in with him. So he just treated us so good. We had dinner every night. We got to go grocery shopping. He did all the grocery shopping for the most part. And we had fun going grocery shopping with him. My mom would never really let us go with her. She would stop on the way home, and we didn't, you know, get to go, but she would go on the weekends, and everything was done by herself. She didn't like to take us with her anywhere, but he did. And we would get Oreos and chips and good cereal, and she would get so mad at him, like, that's too much, and like, makes him happy, leave him alone. You know, thank God we had him in our life to kind of even that out. And I had my son at 26. And I went home for a little bit while I had him, because I had a very difficult pregnancy and a difficult delivery with him. So my mom was actually gracious enough to help, but so was my dad. He was amazing. He's just a nurturing man. And as my little guy got older, he knew his mama was a hairstylist, so he would watch me cut hair, and he would go over to Poppy's house, and he'd have the squirt bottle and a comb, and he'd pretend with his hands, he'd pretend to comb the hair and brush it, and it was really cute. And my dad would sit there for hours. He'd sit on the floor in front of the TV. Ryan was behind him. And they would just do it, and the water is dripping down his head, and my dad's like sleeping. He was, you know, just so relaxed, and you know, it was just amazing for my kids to, or at least my son, to experience him. He was the best man ever. He taught me how to drive, and we kind of had a slanted driveway, and he's like, okay, well, you gotta get a little closer. And we were in this like big old huge Chevy truck. And I'm talking like old, like probably like a 75, right? And it was blue. And I learned how to drive in that big old Chevy truck. And we had a slant on the driveway. And the driveway wasn't super long, but you had to stay out of the sidewalk, right? So he's like, get a little closer, get a little closer. And I accidentally hit the gas instead of the brake, and I ran into the house. And I was like a deer in headlights. And I was like, literally like, oh, fuck. And we look at each other, and he starts laughing. And I'm like, this isn't meant to be funny. Well, I'm like, this is not funny. He is cracking up laughing in the passenger seat. So I start laughing, and my mom comes running out. Oh my God, did we just have an earthquake? And we're like, no, Cindy hit the house. I hit the bricks on the right side of the garage because we was parked in, we had a pretty long driveway, so there was room. So I hit the bricks, and you know, it cost a little bit to fix, but it was an easy fix. We didn't do too much damage. But I have amazing memories about him. 4th of July, we'd have block parties, and he'd wear his red, white, and blue pants with his stars and stripes, and you know, he didn't care. He didn't care what he looked like. They were kind of bell-bottomy, and he was a happy face guy. He liked to write happy faces, and on top of the happy face, he would do like this figure 8, make it look like a cowboy hat. So cute. We actually, when he passed away in 2005, we put him in a very nice suit with that happy face tie he had. That was a little bit of a fight with my stepsister. She didn't want to do it, but you know what? That was him. And I know he was very proud, and I know he laughed about that. So it was a very sad day. When we met him, he was 45 years old, I believe, something like that. And he had already had a massive heart attack, and his mother died giving birth to his younger brother. So heart conditions were in the family. And the doctor said that there was a lot of damage done to his heart, so they would give him maybe just a few years, like his heart would stop and give out. But even though my mom nagged and bitched and complained and was grumpy, abusive in her own words, he lived 20 years with her. And I give him so much credit. He may have had a weak heart, but it was strong. He had a strong heart for so many people. He was a police officer in Malibu at one point, and because he was conflicted, he quit. Then many years later, when he was having all his heart issues before he passed, he was on disability, and he went to work for our local police department, and he was doing parking patrol. And our downtown area, there's always, you know, people with expired meters and things like that. And he would never want to write them a ticket. They'd come out, "I'm so sorry," and he's like, "No problem, you know, just, you know, be aware next time." And you have to have so many of those to show that you're actively working. So he ended up being laid off because he was too nice and didn't want to give everybody parking tickets. So I'm very blessed for him. I'm very grateful for him. He taught me so much. He taught me the words thank you. He taught me how to say goodbye. I mean, we would go home and we'd visit anytime, or even if we were living there, anytime we would leave, he would walk us out. Hong Kong, beep, beep, bye. That was just a thing. And I still do it to this day. Before I end a conversation, I always say thank you and appreciate them. I handwrite notes to people. It's personal. He taught me that. And just to be considerate. I mean, to learn the consideration, sometimes it doesn't come naturally. And I was always such a quiet, shy child, so consideration was a huge thing. I never did anything to hurt anybody or even really talk to anybody because I didn't like being center of attention. But one thing he always did was stand up for me. And I was pregnant with my daughter and didn't know it when he passed away. My sister was pregnant with her son, maybe about 5 months. And my daughter never got the pleasure of meeting him or being part of his life. But with what I believe in, he's with me every day. He's with me all the time. And so are the rest of my soul family. They're together. On a daily, I have signs. I have feelings, so I know my dad and my brother are together, my grandmother. My grandmother comes and sits in the chair that I'm sitting in sometimes and just hangs out. The other place I was at, she would sit at the chair in front of the window. I had an orchid there, and it was just very nice and peaceful. So it brings peace to me to know that his energy is still around me. And then the things that I do on a daily basis is in honor of him. So there's so many differences to be a step parent. My mom was a step parent, and she was one of those ones that was angry. You know, she got along with Dawn's kids because they were older, and my stepsister kind of moved away a little bit, and my stepsister and my mom actually worked together, and that's how my mom met her dad. She introduced them, but she didn't actually think that it would last and work out. And I'm glad that it did. You know, he was so good to us, and you know, I appreciate her so much, my stepsister, for just letting us have that life, because I've seen so many times where step siblings can make things really, really tough and really hard on people. And I am very appreciative of Donna and her kids and her husband, even though we don't have much of a relationship now. I know that, you know, if she were to call me, I'd be there for her, and if I called her, I know she'd be there for me. So that's all that we really need to know, right? Sometimes we just love people from a distance. She doesn't live super close to me, but I do think about her and the kids all the time. Same thing with my stepbrother. I don't see him or hear from him much. Actually, since my dad died, I haven't seen or hear from him. I don't even know where he is. It's partly my fault too, because back in that time, I wasn't healthy myself, and having connections wasn't that big of a deal to me. And I never was really too close with my stepsister. Like I said, she was much older than me, and she got married and moved away when I was like 15. So my stepbrother, we had fun. We got to do some fun things, but my mother was a resentful person. She has her own traumas, but unfortunately they're unhealed, and she continues to take them with her. And I watched her be horrible to her stepkids. When she married Ernie, he had 3 kids, and she had 2. So I remember driving on the freeway, sometimes on the weekends. I didn't know at the time it was every other weekend or what the schedule was, but I just knew it was on the weekend. We'd have to get in the car, the Monte Carlo. We had a black Monte Carlo, and pick them up, take them to our house, and then go and take them back. And unfortunately, one of his kids, Gino, passed away in a car accident at 15. So then it was just my stepbrother, my stepsister, and Michelle and I were close. I loved her dearly. And I just felt like my mom wasn't very nice to them either. She didn't like the ex-wife just because she was the ex-wife. She didn't know anything about her. Just automatically didn't like her. Same thing with my biological. My biological father had us 2 kids and didn't want us. He chose to go with another woman. And that pissed my mom off. He was a player. He liked to play with women. But this particular one, he actually married. So he had, my biological father already had 2 kids before he met my mom, and she didn't know anything about them. And one day, somebody knocks on the door with these 2 kids because their mother had gotten incarcerated and they needed a place to live. And they said no. So from what I understand, the aunt took them in and raised them. I don't know where they are. I did write a letter to my older brother, my half-brother, and sent him a picture of me and my family and told him all about me. And that if he would like to have a relationship, that I'm open to getting to know each other. And if he didn't, then no need to write back. And I've never heard from him. And he only lives, from the last I knew, only 2 hours away from me. From what I've learned, he has a wife that's a teacher and a couple of kids, and he has an auto body business. And I hope he's doing great. Those 2 kids did not deserve their biological father to abandon them either. And I don't blame him for 1 second for not wanting anything to do with David Holmby. I said the name. We don't recognize him as our father. He was a sperm donor. After he left my mother and 2 kids, he left the first mother with 2 kids. He had 4 children at this point. And went with another woman and had another child. But he married her, which really pissed my mom off. And automatically just hated that woman. And that woman hated my mother. And I got to meet my brother, my little half-brother, a couple of times. But I didn't get to grow up with them because the 2 women just couldn't get along. So I have 3 siblings at this point that I couldn't have a relationship with because my parents couldn't get their shit together and be healthy. And sometimes it's just not that easy. Sometimes they don't know they're unhealthy. And you have to forgive them for what they didn't know. I don't blame my biological father for anything because I have no feeling for him. I don't know him. I do know as a child, I remember waiting a couple times and he never showed. And I never really realized who he was until I was about 11 years old. And we went on a couple camping trips with some ATCs in the desert, and then that was it. Being resentful because your partner had another partner with kids is not a threat. To be resentful for that is an unhealed part of you that is only hurting the children. Now, for my first husband had a child that was 18 months old. His mother was young and didn't like me just because I was the girlfriend now. Even though she was the one that chose to leave. She was the one that chose to break up the family. And I had no part of that because I didn't know him at that time. And it made things very difficult for all of us to work together. And she had a court order every other weekend. And that was hard. That was hard on everybody. My son didn't get to grow up with his brother, except every other weekend. And then as soon as he turned 17, he enlisted in the Navy. And he has been gone ever since. He's 30 years old now. My son didn't get to grow up with his brother. My daughter didn't get to grow up with her brother. And I feel for her. And I feel for him. I feel for all 3 of them. Because Ryan and Cody loved each other. They're only 3 years apart. But my daughter hasn't gotten to experience that at all. She's 12 years younger than her older brother and 9 years younger than her younger brother. And she didn't get to grow up with her older brother at all. So as a step parent, I'm just asking to change your mindset. And instead of hating a child for being somebody else's child, embrace them and love them and nurture them. Because if their parents are separated and they're not together anymore, that child is already hurting. As a step parent, you can make a difference. When I got married the second time, I got another stepson. He was older, he was like 14. But what was really cool about that is I got to be his friend. For the longest time, him and I talked confidentially. Until for some reason his father tried to get information out of me, and he was good at doing that. He likes to fish. And I told him a couple things, and I know he went back to Cody because Cody shut down. He didn't talk to me anymore after that. And that was my fault. That boy needed an outlet, and I was going to be that outlet. But I caved into somebody I loved. And I thought I was helping my stepson by telling his dad, in the hopes that his dad would use it for something good. I don't know what happened, but I do know that Cody stopped talking to me like that. Being his friend, I betrayed that, and I apologized, and it hurt our relationship. So hopefully that could be a lesson to somebody. If I ever had a conversation with my stepson again, I would never even tell his dad I had one. And that's sad because I don't want to hold anything back from anybody. But I'm a coach now, and I can have confidentiality, and I don't have to tell anybody anything. I don't have to explain myself to anybody. Neither do you. I'm one of the most misunderstood people, because if you think a certain way about me, that's on you. I'm not going to stand here and convince you or tell you any different. You can think about me how you want to think about me. I'm okay with that. I'm just here to help. And like one of my friends says, if you don't like me, you don't like yourself. I'm going to just try and portray love here and kindness, and just talk about my experience as a step parent, my experience as being a stepchild twice, and what I have experienced since I was a child with step parents. So if you're a step parent and you don't get along with your stepkids, you are the adult. You are supposed to be emotionally mature to handle the job that you signed up for. When you marry that parent, you signed up for that job. You're supposed to take care of that child, those children, or that child, and nurture them and love them like they're your own, because it's not their fault. And if they act out, that's because they need help. They need love. They need nurturing. They need kindness. And they need trust. They need stability. They need to know that their feelings are valid and that they're worthy, and they can trust somebody to talk to. I learned my lesson. I hope that this can help somebody else learn their lesson. These children are so lost. So many of them are so lost, they don't know where they're going or what they're doing. And parents have turned their back on them. Some parents do, some parents don't. The ones that don't are great. That's amazing. You show up to every soccer game, take them to all their dance recitals and cheer them on. I didn't have that. So I encourage that. When a child looks out in the audience and doesn't see their parent there, it breaks their heart, because they don't feel loved. They don't feel valued enough for you to take the time to come. And whatever that excuse is, it doesn't matter to a child. It does not matter. I was in choir, and my mother never came to one single choir concert. I was in track and field. I don't even know if my mom knows I was. She never came to one meet. My kids played baseball. Both those boys played baseball. She never came to one game. My daughter played soccer. I think my mom came to 1 or 2 games, and she lived right down the street. Be a good parent. Nurture your kids. Love them. Show them kindness and show them some respect. Let them talk. Let their feelings be valid and let them trust you. Kids need a chance. With the way the public school systems are and the way our government is now, just give them a chance and listen to them. They are people. They have dignity. They have worth. They have value. And they have feelings. And those feelings need to be validated by a parent. They're too young to be validating it themselves. They need to learn their guidance and their worth through you, through the people in their life. If we want to raise good, healthy kids, we need to become healthy ourselves. Going within and healing trauma is hard as fuck. Trust me, I've been doing it for 4 years. And it seems like when I get through one trauma, there's another one there, because all I did all my life was bury it. I was silenced as a child. I wasn't allowed to express my feelings or cry because I was called a crybaby. Get over it. Let that child express themselves. And if they're expressing themselves in a negative way, try and look at the environment and find out why they're doing that. It's a cry for help. Children just don't act like that for no reason. If your environment is calm and you instill meditation, you don't yell, you don't scream, your child won't either. But you threaten to put them in the car at 5 years old and they go and talk to teachers about that, that's not going to look good for you. I was in the dressing room one day, and there's a little girl and a woman. I wasn't sure who the woman was, mother or whatever. She was yelling, and you can hear her smacking this child. And I'm trying to change my clothes and try something on in the other room. And she's like, Grammy, stop it, stop hitting me. And so I finally spoke up and I said, leave the child alone. You know what she said to me? She told me it was none of my fucking business and to butt the fuck out. No, I'm not gonna do that. This was like 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I was shy as shit. It was shocking for me to speak up for something like that. But when it comes to a child being verbally abused and hit in a dressing room by a grandmother, you've got something wrong with you. And I don't care if that child is acting anyway. You do not respond in a violent way, because that is just going to turn that child violent. The toxic cycle keeps going. I'm here to help break that. I'm breaking it in my own family, and I'm reaching out to men and women to break it in their own family. If you have children, break that toxic cycle. Stop abusing them if you're abusing them. If you're somebody who likes to hit your kids, there's a difference between correction and hitting. Correction is tapping them on the hand, right? You just tap them on the hand and tell them no. It's consistency. It's not hitting. It's inconvenient and not very fun for the parents to continue to do this. So sometimes we just react in spanking them, right? But we have to be consistent. We need to hold ourselves accountable on how we are raising our children. And being a step parent is an amazing gift. And I'm just asking you to embrace it, please. Embrace that child. embrace your partner, embrace the family that you have. It takes a strong person to turn things around and to break a toxic cycle. A very strong person. But I know you've got it in you. If I can do it, anybody can do it. It takes some time going within, and how I started was in the bathtub. My spiritual journey started in the bathtub, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why I was so drawn to the bathtub, but I was. And I would spend hours in that bathtub during COVID. And we were all shut down. Lots of time. I'd put my headphones in, turn my YouTube on, and I'd listen. And to be honest, it was Joyce Meyer that got me thinking about resentment and hatred and unforgiveness. The things that she was talking about in her sermons was exactly how I was acting. Why was I acting that way? Because it was a learned behavior. I would slam if I was mad, I wouldn't say anything to anybody. I'd just start slamming cabinets and drawers and stomping around. Why? Because that's what my mother did. She didn't communicate. If you don't know Joyce Meyer, I highly recommend Joyce Meyer. She's on YouTube. She's a Christian preacher. But I'll tell you what, she talks about everyday life. And that's what sucked me in. Everyday life mixed in with the expectation that God has on us. Whether you believe that or not, it doesn't matter if you pick up the everyday life part of it. She says a couple scriptures from the Bible and things like that, but it doesn't mean that you have to be connected all of it. I connected to all of it. God is my higher power. The universe is my higher power. And I want to live the life that God has intended for me. And I learned this from Joyce Meyer. I also learned a lot from Above Inspiration. Above Inspiration Healing is amazing. All YouTube. So I started my journey in the bathtub. I didn't know then, but I do know now, those were healing baths. So maybe start taking a bath, put your headphones in, and listen to something good on YouTube. Something good, something positive. Tony Robbins, Joe Dispenza, Joyce Meyer, Above Inspiration. There's a lot of good meditations out there, a lot of universal sounds, a lot of frequencies that are really good. And just be still with yourself. Close your eyes. Put yourself in a safe place where nobody will disturb you. And just be still with yourself. Be alone with yourself. And start asking yourself the questions that you're looking for. I promise it will help. Just start there. I'm here to help. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Please be an inspiration to those kids. And if you see somebody abusing a child, speak up for them. Like I spoke up for the lady, for that girl in the dressing room. I went and got her help because that lady wouldn't open the door. I went and got help. I got a worker. But that worker, we had to go get the manager. And I don't know what happened to that little girl afterwards. Because back then we didn't do welfare checks like I would do now. If there is a child that is being abused by somebody and it looks like a family member, Call 911 and ask for a welfare check and tell them where you are. You will not have to be involved in it. Let the police handle it. But children need help. They need help from people that are willing to speak up for them. Let's stop the abusive, toxic cycles. Let's start healing ourselves within. And women supporting women. Women loving women. Let's show our baby girls and our sons how to treat each other, how to treat women, how to treat men. Let's start. Let's start now. And if you don't know how, reach out, make a comment. I have a team. I have a team. Even more qualified than me. So please, reach out. I hope this finds you well. I want you to know that you are worth it, that you are valued, and that you mean the world to so many people. Love and light.